Hi, everyone. This is the Digital Edge podcast where we discuss how digital is transforming our lives and businesses. I'm Françoise Lamotte with my co-host Dominic Mugli.
Hi, everyone.
And today we are going to talk about resistance to change, especially, this applying to digital transformation. So let me get started. I find, resistance to change already an interesting way to phrase things because every time there is change, every time there is resistance. I mean, those two go together. So when we say fighting resistance to change, I think that's where it becomes interesting because we are fighting something that is common, normal, ordinary, happens all the time. So maybe, should we fight it or should we go with the flow? That would be my first philosophical question about
That's
resistance.
quite a battle. We're fighting something that's already fighting.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. What do you think?
Yeah, it's fascinating, right? We work in the space of digital transformation, which inherently, right, has a change component associated with it, right? And I think the interesting thing, or at least what I learned over time, like starting out focusing on technology mainly and learning as much about it as I could and applying that in businesses was this, recognition that, the technology itself is a critical piece, of course, right, to gain efficiencies, reduce costs, and creating new opportunities in businesses. But this element of change, right, and however small the technical change that it is that we're pursuing, there's this element of the human aspect to be considered, right, which is just as significant, maybe more significant than the technology itself.
Yeah,
So very, very, very ingrained in digital transformation.
yeah, and most project failures, I would venture, are not linked to issues with the technology, but it's issues with, lack of support from the leadership, lack of vision, lack of skills, poor adoption, bad communication. I think these are the main issues we face when we talk about digital transformation. Of course, you can have some technical issues like, I choose the wrong solution or my
Yeah,
infrastructure was not ready.
right.
But I think that most of the issues are coming from the human side more than the technical side. Is that your experience as well?
Yes, and I actually was just thinking of an interesting example. I talked to an old friend of mine a little while ago who's leading a small company. They have about 40 people, and they were looking into collaboration tools for better collaboration. And uh, they decided on a tool to adopt. They purchased it and deployed it, but about half of the organization did not like the choice that was made, and they straight out refused to actually use it in their daily work, right? So you're thinking like, oh my god, like change in large organization is hard enough, but you see a small company of dozens of people where change is even difficult, right? Where, yes, I guess you could almost say as soon as you have one person involved, you have a chance that there's resistance to making it, doing something differently than before.
Yeah. So, I mean, there are thousands of books on change management and stuff, and all a lot of theories, a lot of things that
Mm.
are really, important to think about. But maybe one of the thing that I feel, important and that I've been hammering recently is who do you pick when you have to drive change, and very often we go and we fight because we're talking about fighting resistance. We fight our enemies, the enemies of the project, the people that don't want to do it, and this is usually a lot of effort for zero results. When
Yeah.
you need to convince people and when you need to argue, it's often too late. So I think one of the strategies that is much more effective is not to waste a lot of energy fighting the detractors, but more, moving ahead with the innovators, the people that are supporting the change, the people that see the value. And this is really where we need to focus. So the point is not we are fighting resistance, but we are supporting the ones who want to move ahead, and those will, over time be able to embark other people up to, the laggards or the more resistant ones. And those strategies, they need to be thought about, they need to be structured. It's not having a unified communication to all the organization, but I think it really makes sense to spend time understanding who are the detractors, who are the promoters, who I should embark early on in the journey, and who I should just leave aside for the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think very well put, right? I kind of think of change, right? It can come in different packages. Some change is kind of imposed on people, right? If you have an organizational change, like a reduction in force, right? Because business is not working out well and you can't afford to keep your personnel on hand, right? And let's say if you have to let people go and restructure, right? You end up with people in new roles, a new manager maybe, which is not something that anybody from, the people on the ground can influence. And so I think this is more of a more challenging situation because again, it's superimposed. It's not necessarily ground up from like, hey, let's do something better. Let's do better projects or what have you. But then it's the other aspect also where it's you have more transparent change, where people are informed maybe of a new vision or a new strategy that the company is pursuing. And I think in those cases, just like you said, like identify people who are your supporters for the change and advocate that with their peers and their colleagues around the organization. I think the more that you can include people in the change and help, get them involved in shaping the future, right? Then you have a much better chance of success because it's not like, oh, somebody told me what to do, but it's, hey, I was part of making this new situation and this new environment, even to the point of specifying their own roles, perhaps, right? If that's what it entails, and that way, whenever possible, right? I look for that engagement as early as possible, that people can be part of whatever change is coming. So they're not, right? The fear factor is not as strong as it would be if it's just told this is what it is. And then, the apprehension is there and the uncertainty with it as well.
Yeah, 100% agree. And when we talk about digital transformation more precisely, where, it means that maybe the processes you are using are going to change, or you need, to use a new tool. I think there are two factors that are important. One is absolutely collaboration and having people input into the process change or the project, and understanding what is not working today, how we are going to improve the situation. So really having them as part of the input and as stakeholders in the project. The other part is about training, because I suspect that a lot of the fears are about being obsolete. I'm not going to understand the new way of working. This is too complex for me. And I think training is super important to make sure that people, put aside their fears and are open to, learning new things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. I think there's an aspect of the security, right? Of I have a future, I have a responsibility in the future, and it's something that I can also work towards, right? And being able to build this with that engagement, and then training again. I think as early as possible, to be involved in that process, and getting people in, and also being transparent about the benefits as well as, some downsides potentially, right? Because everybody understands not always everything is roses when you implement or change, right? But I think transparency and openness also go a really long way.
And when we talk about communication, I think also the point is not to have, to have obviously a general communication that is going to set the path and the direction, etc. But also to go to a more granular level where people understand what does it mean for me, what role am I going to play, how am I expected to contribute? Because sometimes the communication remains at a very high level. But I think it's really the critical role of managers to translate those broad strategies into very actionable ways for their team members on saying, okay, what does it mean for you, and how can you contribute to the change? So I think this is also important.
Yeah, exactly. And I think at the end of the day, right, we have to keep in mind that for people, who may be on a career trajectory, right, and on the path towards a promotion perhaps, or compensation benefits, and if you have the feeling that, oh, now I need to start over again, and it's going to take me another 2 years to take on more responsibility because I have to learn everything new, right? It can cause this apprehension or resistance as well. And so I think thinking about people and how they're impacted and collecting feedback and thoughts early on, right? So we don't need to assume what people are thinking and what they're worried about. So that can be directly addressed as well, and much more quickly than kind of guessing what it might be or why people are, not fully on board with the change, perhaps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and maybe just the last point I want to make is that there are also some strategies, first is maybe not take on a massive project that has a lot of complexity and long-term impact, etc. But sometimes change needs to be done in small steps. And, we call it the lateral project strategy, which means that you make a smaller project that is more accessible, easier to understand to the people who are in the scope. And once this small chunk succeeds, then they are more open to addressing the big change. So that's another strategy to.
Yeah, love that perspective of practicing change, right? And making it normal that things change and things are going to be okay as well as a result.
So maybe as a conclusion for me, I think we labeled this podcast "Fighting Resistance to Change." I think my takeaway is, first, resistance is natural, and probably an effective approach to change management is not fighting resistance, but trying to support the change by communication, collaboration, slicing things in small pieces. I mean, there are a lot of techniques that I think are more effective than fighting. So I think it's a lot in the art of communication and management.
Yes, very much so. Very much so. I think it's as soon as we recognize that change needs to be addressed, I think you have a good chance of actually succeeding. When I see that it is not being considered and something just needs to get hammered into an organization or into people, that's when it gets a hard time, and that's where it gets the resistance. So plan on that change, plan on the impact to your people, and involve them as early as you can, and you're more than likely going to have a good outcome with the changes that you're making.
Thank you, Dominic, and talk to you very soon.
All right. Thank you, Francois. Thanks, everybody. See you next time.